It's 3 minutes after 2, and on the line now, we're joined by facilitator of Dads in the Picture, Daniel Mukwena, to unpack the conversation, instilling right teachings in young men and boys to redefine masculinity. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. A warm welcome to Power Zone.
Greetings, Pretty, and the listeners of Power FM. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Let's start by defining masculinity and then going back to redefining, as we put it, for our conversation today. What's the two differences between what we are trying to achieve and what has been the long-standing understanding of masculinity?
Yes. Well, if we reimagine masculinity, Pretty, we would then look back into traditional models of masculinity, which are often rooted in this idea of dominance, emotional suppression, and violence, and those models have failed. So they must be replaced. How do we replace? We reimagine the masculinity. So we must replace them with a vision, and that vision must include manhood, or teachings rather, that would include emotional intelligence, nurturing and strength, and also service, because we think that redefining leadership has to have, at the center of it must be a service to one's family or a community. And that's how we look at it from the perspective of that in the picture.
Now, obviously, with this new installation of right teachings in a young man, I want you to take me through these various steps of maybe highlighting, number one, the teachings that we need to bring to book. And we've seen that because of the lack of teachings, the understanding of gender-based violence and femicide continues to just scourge. And with that being said as well, there's a number of activities that are also happening that one could draw back to the right teachings of a young man. What are we specifically embodying when we unpack this conversation of the right teachings in a young man?
Well, look, Pretty, it's a difficult one, but we need to break the cycle, and the cycle of violence and those traditional models that I just mentioned, because when a boy is raised without love and guidance, often becomes a man that is driven by pain and aggression. So, as early as possible, when we can intervene as fathers to create spaces where there could be mentorship programs, that can pair young men with positive male role models, Also, schools and communities should have dialogues to explore what is it that we say manhood is? What is the responsibility of a man? Because in the ancient time we had the rite of passage where a man was taken through a process, or rather a young man was taken through a process of a transition from being a young man to being a fully responsible man. So we need those teachings to come back. We need those restorative, restorative justice circles that can help men to unlearn harmful behaviors and reconnect with their sense of being, but most importantly, their community at large. So we need to bring back those aspects. Community should be redefined or should be seen as a classroom, where, for instance, this transformation, these teachings can happen, because they cannot happen in isolation. These teachings need to happen in our communities, in our churches, in our schools, youth centers, you name them. So I think that's where we start. We need to start reimagining how we can break this cycle, especially in this generation where, South Africa, where we are right now, it's a time of reckoning, a time where there's an alarming rate of crime, especially you just mentioned gender-based violence. This is perpetuated mainly by the absent father. The toxic masculinity demands bold and agent response, because at the heart of this crisis is a fractured notion of manhood that was passed from the past generations who are not pretty to the next. So to break this cycle, we really must plant a new seed, and it begins with redefining that manhood and restoring a healthy and masculine presence through intentional teachings for boys and young men.
You mentioned men understanding their responsibility. What do you refer to when you connect them with men? When we speak about responsibilities connected to men, what are these responsibilities that you are highlighting?
Well, look, we can just say, for instance, there's too many homes right now, pretty in South Africa, where fatherhood is now defined as a financial responsibility only, and not this emotional security. So when, for instance, there's a separation or divorce within a particular family, a boy loses, or there's a void now that happens because parents now look at this their responsibility as just being financially and not empowering the boy through this emotional guidance. So I think being present is more relevant and powerful than being perfect, and that's how we encourage that. The responsibility that we need to give to ourselves as adults, as men, is to ensure that we are present in our young men and boys' life, and that fatherhood begins with accountability, whether as a biological father or as an uncle or as a grandfather. It begins with accountability, and we emphasize that over and over again, pretty, to ensure that, at the end of the day, like I said, this transformation cannot happen in isolation. We need to come together as mothers, as fathers. We need to come together, because as that's in the picture, we are not an organization that mainly stands to patronize women, but we are saying that we also need to be present in our children's life, especially young men and young boys.
Do you advocate the lack of teachings to the absence of fathers?
Could you say that again, Pridgin?
Do you then advocate the lack of teaching? Because now we're speaking about instilling these teachings. Do you advocate it to maybe these the absent fathers?
Of course. That's our core function. Our existence came as a result of one of our founding member, Delimesh, who unfortunately succumbed to death through violence a couple of weeks ago here in South Africa. So our core function as Death is a Picture is to actually say we need to stand up as men and advocate that we have the responsibility to educate these young men and to ensure that they become responsible citizens in the country to curb the scourge of violence, and in particular gender-based violence.
And when it comes to communities, do we really have sufficient role models for these young men and boys?
Well, I would say from the bottom of my heart, and where we are right now is the picture mourning the loss of our founder, is that we lack these role models in our communities, pretty, and it's a very sad reality, because young men and young boys cannot appoint themselves to become role models. They need men who have gone through certain experiences in life, to ensure that they also become responsible fathers, to ensure that they become also responsible young people in their communities. So at the moment, that is our core function. That's what we are advocating for, to have more fathers who can become positive role models for these young people. So at the moment, there is a huge void and lack of positive role models in our communities.
Earlier on, you spoke about various places where people can sort for dialogues and different men that could always be of assistance, whether it might be a role model for that matter. Would you then not advise that maybe in some of the communities, maybe somebody brings a person they deem as a father figure that could go through these conversations with them? And what good does that bring about in instilling these right teachings?
Certainly, Precious. I said that this transformation cannot happen in isolation. You see, that is where I'm saying that a community needs to become a new classroom. Schools, youth centers can host these dialogues and conversations, and there are certain models that can be used, to enhance or rather to create interest in involving young people into these dialogues or these conversations. Involving elder men as well in redefining or this masculinity, and shaping the moral compass of the next generation. I think it's important. So what we are saying is that we are not just going to fight crime. There is, of course, a scale of crime because of this absent fathers and lack of mentorship and positive role model. But that is not where we are. We are fighting for the soul of this nation. We are redefining fatherhood and masculinity. And it's not just a side issue that we think that it can only happen during the month of October or once a year. It's something that we constantly have to be intentional about it and be able to look at it from a perspective of a redefining that traditional model that was there before, but somehow it got misconstrued and is no longer empowering to young men, such as this rite of passage or initiation they used to call it. So I think involving elder men who can be able to help young people to also, reshape their moral compass, and it will certainly become an integral part of ensuring that we have a healthy society where young men and young boys are able to express their feelings and their emotions freely, without thinking that if they do so, they might be seen as weak or not as men enough.
In Zulu they say umutu gochuse manzi, and I think which just simply means the earlier the better, to when it comes to really instilling the right teachings in children generally. Most people might deem maybe adolescence as the most toughest times of really trying to instill right teachings without young men and boys being rebellious. What age group would you maybe indicate as most vulnerable to these teachings?
Well, I wouldn't say there's a specific age, pretty, but as like what you've just said in terms of tupa ikoba esalimedi kasesotho. So the earlier, the better. I would say, look, at the age of 10 years, boy is ready to understand what is happening around them, to understand what is happening with their body, to understand what is happening with their psyche. So the earlier you can start, or we can start this process, is going to be better, because as they grow into their teenage stage, they are now able to make responsible choices, as opposed to when you start teaching them at that age and they've already gotten the influence from their social environment. It becomes difficult because now you have to help them to unlearn what they already learned from the streets or from the school or any other social setting. So the earlier we can start this process, the better. But like I said again, let us get more people involved into this. It's not a one family thing. It's not a one street thing or one community thing. It's a national a phenomenon of this scourge that we are facing. And so we need to come together as a community and be able to point out to traditions or models that worked in the previous generations that can be incorporated into this generation, ailing so much into this mainstream media, social media. There's all sorts of things. At the age of 8 years, already parents are buying children cell phones and children are connecting to the internet. So why can't we start these teachings at that phase as well, so that by the time they get into the teenage age, they are able to take responsibilities and they are able to become better young people, so that in the future we don't have this crisis.
I think you're absolutely right. I want us now to shift the conversation to we have taken the boy child and the young man to the various platforms for conversing, the dialogues, and now we need to look at some of the behavioral patterns that would necessarily be an indication of right direction and an indication of wrong direction. Clearly, meaning that the boy child has not observed most of the information that has been shared with them.
Mm. So I think if that's in the picture, we have summer camps, we have winter camps, we have already started this process pretty. So and it's an ongoing process. Parenting, fatherhood, motherhood, all of this is an ongoing, it's a lifelong commitment, you know. So we are not going to say that we just had a once-off workshop or a dialogue, and therefore we assume that every young man or who attended that workshop, you know, has got to change somehow. You know, it's an ongoing thing, and it has to be intentional. You know, and so we are saying, as that in the picture, that the more we commit ourselves in being present or being in the picture of our children, the more we're going to ensure that we nurture them and we teach them that they can be of a good service also to their peers, you know, because if one child can change and become a positive role model to other young people, you know, that is a good step going forward, you know. So we're saying at this in the picture that nurturing and mentoring these young boys and young men is an ongoing process. It's not a once-off situation.
I like the fact that you make it known that it is an ongoing process that need not stop. Just like motivation, every morning you need to get a simple dose of it to get the strength that you require to take you through an everyday challenges. What are we looking at when we say it doesn't stop? Are there any certain activities that need to be done maybe once a week, twice a week, or is there any plan that can be brought about that can really enhance the communication, enhance some of the teachings, and to see how far one has come as well?
Look, I think it begins with the idea of working together as parents, you know, because often this crisis is perpetuated by the fact that there is also a crisis in our country of absent fathers. You know, I don't know. There's a new word called deadbeat these days.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that the more the parents are involved in the upbringing and the nurturing of these young men, these young boys, you know, it helps. So it starts with the family, you know. I cannot point at a solution that I saw on the internet somewhere. It starts at home. It starts with us parents understanding that even when we have separated, you know, there were difficulties, there were challenges, and all of that. At the center of that, there is a young man who is faced with a world that is so cruel, you know, and so we need to come together. We need to work together to ensure that there is consistency in building this young man's confidence and building this young man's outlook, you know, into life. So as we go on with our separate lives, we still need to come together and focus on the development of this young person. And I think that's where it starts. It starts in the family, then it grows into the community, and in the nation at large.
Yeah, I think we all have a particular role to play, and it works better from my understanding in terms of the conversation I've had and some of the information you've shared. It works better when there is a man in the household, when the conversations are man to man. But how do we bring in females as well to the equation? How does it get easier for a mother to speak to their son, for a sister to speak to their brother, and for any other female representative around young men and boys?
Look, that is very important, Pretty, because Abu Mama Yimbogoto and Bomneva Tsaratipaka Kabo Haleng, and unfortunately, we have a system in South Africa, whether it's a justice system or social system, that does not really do much of justice for the fathers, So as soon as we now want to define the present father, the system defines the father through financial intervention or material contribution, nothing more than that. And the mother is seen as a natural, or somebody who can take care of a child or a minor child in many cases. However, now we are discussing an issue that involves boys and young men. I wouldn't speak of girls because I don't have girl children. But that does not mean that I cannot be present in my girl child in the future if I do happen to have a girl child. But what I'm trying to say is that we need to also work towards reimagining a different system, an indigenous system, that is that can allow men to become fully involved, even at some point to be primary carers of these young boys and young men when, for instance, there's a situation where there's separation or divorce, you see, because in most cases, the primary care ends up being given to the mother because the system has been like that for the past 100 years. And nobody thinks that, now we have men who are capable of raising these young people in an environment that is empowering and be able to have, and they're able to have conversations that can help these young people to transform from just becoming broken boys, because when these separations and divorces happen, they leave a wound in these young people's, or a void in these young people's lives. And in most cases, mothers are not able to fix that problem. They cannot fix that problem through material things. It has to be a conversation. It has to be a partnership. And so we are advocating for that as well. Many of the dads that are involved with our organization are struggling through this justice system, because their children are being put into the care of their mothers, who are in most cases sometimes not even empowered enough, whether mentally or anyhow, to mentor these young boys to become better people in the society or in their community. So I'm saying, to answer your question, it is important that we also pay a little bit of attention to what is happening in our justice system as well.
Yeah. I think you're bringing a very fair point and something that we need to really look into. I want to pick your brain here because obviously you're a facilitator, Dad's in the picture. There has been a conversation of lack of funding when it comes to supportive structures for men and boys, young men and boys. What's your response to these allegations? Where do you stand when it comes to a response to some of the insight?
Look, it has been a challenge, Pretty. It has been a challenge for quite some time. It's difficult because, like we just referred to, the system that is working against fathers, where, for instance, as a man, even if I'm unemployed and I'm raising a child, am I eligible? Do I know that I have a right to go and apply for a social security grant? Things like that. When you go to these offices, Cabo SAS and so on, you find mothers there, Not to say that is the wrong thing, but we are just saying that there is no much of provision and public education around the importance of men's issues and men's rights and men's challenges in our country. Unfortunately, Therefore, that makes funding also to be a difficult thing to access because organizations don't really see, or funders or philanthropists, whatever you want to call them, don't really see the need to fund these programs because they're saying, but government has got provision for children that are vulnerable or for communities that are sort of working towards securing the rights of children, But here we are talking specifically about men's issues, because they start, like you were saying earlier on, at a young age. And if you don't address those things at a young age, they carry on with you to an adult stage. So there is a need for organizations such as our organization to access funding so that we can go out into communities where there isn't even any provision for resources such as the internet, where people can access things through virtual interactions and so on. We literally need to be there and host workshops and do those mentorship programs and so on. All those things need the resources. They need money, So there is a need, so much need for funding in this space.
Yeah, Daniel, thank you so much for your time and your insight as well. We wish you all the best, all of luck as well with your engagements, and hopefully that this conversation will fall into the right ears and the channels will be open for the funding that is required. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pretty. It's always a great pleasure to be here.
And that's Daniel Mokoena, facilitator, Dads in the Picture, speaking about instilling the right teachings in young men and boys to redefine masculinity. What an interesting conversation. And I think I had to drop that question in because of what I've been hearing, especially throughout the month of June. As much as there's a high comparison level of different genders being able to receive funding, it now looks like the scale has finally tilted differently, and now more men are looking for funding to bring about the initiative of redefining the masculinity, to have these ongoing dialogues, to assist community and society. The NPOs in our communities are crying out and really needing and wanting this very safety net to be used for the next generation of boys and men in a country where the crime rate is on an all-time high. Gender-based violence and femicide as well is another topic that really is a frustrating scourge at this point, because we've been speaking about it one too many times. It has been ongoing. It now needs to come to a full stop. With these initiatives, funding is proving to be a very big burden that needs to be sorted. I guess I'll safely say faster than the speed of light if we ever want to get to a better position as South Africans. Once again, a huge thank you to Daniel Mokoena. As we wrap up the last 30 minutes of the show on a Tuesday, we deserve some motivation. Boitumelo Ralikomo joins us, motivational speaker, as we speak about the beginning of the week and some motivation, unpacking the importance of process